Okay, the purpose of this video is to walk you through the arteries of the arm and uh, upper neck area. I guess we don't have a whole lot. It's pretty much just the arm here. So I'm on plate 109, if you want to pull that out with me. And I'll kind of go through the order that blood would flow. So our heart, and I know this looks kind of weird. I've taken the hand and cut it off and moved it up. That was just to make this so it wasn't quite as tall. So our heart would be right over here. And recall that we'd have the aorta, and then branching off the aorta was the brachiocephalic. And remember, we didn't really call it the right brachiocephalic because there is no left brachiocephalic. The left side goes subclavian and carotid, if you recall, just kind of the way the heart is positioned. It is slightly off to the left, and that's kind of why it's done that way. The heart, although it's relatively midline, when we cover our heart when we're doing the Pledge of Allegiance, we're probably missing part of the heart. It's actually almost right behind the sternum, right in the very middle. So I'm going to be right up here, and so brachiocephalic, and it's called brachiocephalic because the brachio part's going to go to the arm, and the cephalic part is going to go to the head. And so you probably know this already, and if you want to highlight these, you can, or circle it to make sure you know this is the common carotid. Remember, the carotid is so famous that we don't actually often refer to it as the artery because there is no carotid vein. And for none of these, I don't know if that was proper, but you do not have to use artery for any of the remainder of the blood vessels. We're only going to be talking about arteries. So we've got the brachiocephalic, common carotid, then branching off is the subclavian, which is headed towards the clavicle, but technically the way they have it drawn here, and from everything I've seen, it never actually goes under the clavicle. It actually changes name just before or as it reaches the clavicle. So the subclavian, then it actually changes into the axillary. And if you recall, we said the armpit area when we were doing regions was the axillary region. Now in the axillary region, we've got several branches off of that. The first one that we would come to would actually be the superior thoracic. Or thoracic is kind of the thorax, the upper chest cavity. And so that's the first one. So superior thoracic. And then that would imply that we would have an inferior. And we actually don't have one drawn in here. I believe it does exist, but not the way we actually have it here. So superior thoracic. Then branching off is going to be this, in mine is this purple network. I don't know what color you did yours or will do yours. But this is actually a network of things that are actually going to feed the muscle that's right here. And if you recall, what muscle would sit right here on the shoulder? Hopefully you thought of the deltoid. So this is going to feed your deltoid muscle and other muscles as well. And that's really what they were doing up here in this area. Many of your arteries are really feeding muscle. They're feeding other parts. Your skin also needs blood, but the higher demand would be the muscles, especially when we start talking the limbs. And so this main branch here is the thoracoacromial. It's thoraco because it's going to be doing some thorax region, acromial because it's actually around the acromial process that we had here of the scapula. So the circular part here, I've probably in the purpose games done that, the thoracoacromial artery. And then all of the things that come off. So I can count 1, 2, 3. These would be the branches of the thoracoacromial or thoracoacromial branches. Next we come to, so we follow the blood along, we would actually come to this, and this is going to be the lateral thoracic, Next we come to, this is actually going to head underneath and behind the rib cage, and it would actually be the subscapular. So remember, we actually had the subscapular muscle. Likely this is going to feed that muscle. Then we have a blood vessel that actually comes off of the axillary and then actually reconnects with the axillary. So blood could actually go in two directions here, and it could actually make the loop. And this is actually a circumflex. Remember, circum means around. We have the circumflex of the coronary artery that went around the heart. And so we have the anterior circumflex. And as soon as it actually passes back behind the humerus, we call it the posterior circumflex. So that's why the two different colors here. Is there an exact dividing line? No, not really. But the dotted line here indicates it's behind the humerus. So anterior and posterior circumflex humeral or of the humerus, if you call it that way. I'm not going to get real picky. All right, now we're headed down the arm. And if you recall, we had the upper arm, the arm above your elbow, we called that the brachial. And that's exactly what they name this main artery going down under your bicep, under the bicep and muscles that we have there. First branching off here, we would have what's called the Profunda Brachii. Don't know the origin of that, to be real honest with you, but brachii because it is coming off of in the brachial area. So you have one main, and these are kind of interesting because you notice around the elbow, a lot of these are going to branch off of the brachii, and then they're actually going to reconnect. And that is a characteristic. The blood flow actually does reconnect. So it's a little different when we see, and we've seen that in other places as well. It happened in the heart, and it's happened up here. So, whoa, switched on me there. So the Profunda Brachii, then it does have some branches. And so this one coming off, if you did that in a separate color or you didn't, it's okay. And so we have the Profunda Brachii branch. And again, there would likely be others of these. We're only doing major vessels. Then we get our first, and actually, I'll continue down. We get our first example of reconnecting. And we actually then call this the radial recurrent because it is connecting with the radial. So it's going to go the profunda, then it's going to reconnect. We call those recurrents, reconnect. And this orange blood vessel we have here is actually going to go along the ulna. So we actually call that since this will be the ulnar vein or artery, excuse me, this is called the ulnar recurrent. The ulnar recurrent. Oh, and actually I just misspoke. My bad. The radial side, I'm backwards here. So the radius, because this is going to have the end that twists. So the radial recurrent, and this is going to be the radial artery. Okay, so go back up here to our brachii, and also then branching off, we've got two blood vessels that are going to be here, and these are going to be the superior and inferior collateral. Remember, collateral means like along the side or running together, and these do actually kind of run together. And then they are going to change names at the elbow. So the superior collateral branches off first, then the inferior collateral. Then at the elbow, they're going to change names. And remember, they're going to reconnect. Well, recall, this is going to be the ulnar. This is going to be the ulnar. Radial is over here, the ulnar, my aqua color here. So notice that the superior goes back behind where your funny bone is. That whole canal there, we had talked about that. And so this is actually called the posterior ulnar recurrent because it's going to go back behind the humerus. Then we've got one that connects in front. That's called the anterior ulnar recurrent. So they do make sense once you see the names of them, and hopefully that will help you remember the names. Then if you remember down here below, between your radius and the ulna, we had that interosseous membrane, that ligament that kind of connected those two bones together, held things together. So we have what's called the common interosseus, and this would get smaller and smaller and feed that ligament and muscles of the forearm. And that's where those muscles are when you're typing or doing fine motor work and moving your fingers. So the common interosseus. So now we're going to jump back up here. We would continue down. So recall here, this is the radial side. So this is going to be the radius. The aqua was the ulnar. Then we actually, and so this is palms up. So we're looking at things as palm being up. So this is actually the right arm with the palm up. And so we're going to have these two arches. And again, so the one that is more towards the top, superficial. Remember, superficial meant more towards the surface. Then the blue here is the deep palmar arch. The deep palmar arch. Then we've got all these feeding your fingers, and we simply refer to those as common palmar digital. Remember, digital meant digits. Common just means that they're actually going to branch off into smaller and smaller things, and we call it palmar because this is on the palm. Very likely there would actually be some if this hand was turned over. There would likely be a common palmar dorsum as well on the top of your fingers and things like that. So those are the main arteries of the arm. hopefully this has been helpful. Oh, also one thing I'll point out, they do see these arrows in here, and those are places where you can actually do pulse. So you can do pulse in your wrist in a couple different places, and actually a lot of times the blood drive folks, for me at least, will do this one over here on the radial side. You can also take your pulse up in your upper arm if you find this main vessel here is pretty large, and so you're going to get a lot of the blood there. And you can actually do it up near your clavicle as well if you find just the right spot. So that's hopefully will help you understand and introduce into the arteries of the arm.